Hi, alternates. Donna Adelson's trial is in full swing, and if you've been keeping up with season 4 so far, we dropped a two-part prelude for this particular case. I told you not to listen if you didn't want to be biased. But after listening to the state's opening statements on Friday, it is safe for you to go back and listen to those two parts because that was the prosecution's opening statement in a nutshell. That being said, let's get into day one. The presiding judge in the Leon Circuit Court is Stephen Everett, and I really like him. He's not messing around. He doesn't want to waste the jurors' time, and he is watching everyone's move. In fact, during today's testimony, Donna Adelson became really emotional when pictures of Dan Markel's injuries were shown to the jury when they were showing his autopsy pictures, and she became really, really emotional. Right before lunch, outside the presence of the jury, Judge Stevens told Donna that she would have to contain her emotions as best as she could because the jury has to decide the case on the facts presented, not by emotional outbursts. Day one was loaded with witnesses. Usually they, start slow, but this day they hit the ground running. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about the state's opening statement. The prosecutor, Assistant State Attorney Sarah Catherine Dugan, she laid out what the jury would hear. This was the case for the murder of a law professor by the name of Dan Markel. He was Donna's son-in-law. Dan was married to Donna's only daughter, Wendy. Together, they had two sons. Dan and Wendy lived in Tallahassee, Florida, while Donna and her husband, Harvey, and her son, Charlie, lived in Miami. When Wendy's marriage began to fall apart, she and Dan divorced. But Wendy wanted to relocate to Miami, which is 8 hours south of Tallahassee. But Dan didn't allow that to happen. In fact, he legally blocked Wendy from leaving Tallahassee with the kids. Donna, the matriarch, did not like this, and she would do anything, absolutely anything, including murder, to get the kids and Wendy down to Miami. The prosecutor said that the jury would see emails between Donna and the family, including Wendy and Charlie Adelson, showing all the plots that Donna had come up with to mess with Dan. Those emails would prove that Donna told Wendy to take the kids to a Catholic church and take pictures of them right there. And this was to be done to piss off Dan, who was a devout Jewish man. Donna further told Wendy that the family, her dad, Wendy, and her brother Charlie, could offer Dan $1 million to allow the kids to move. The prosecutor laid out that Donna was sitting in the defense chair charged with murder, solicitation to commit murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. Donna did not pull the trigger, but she did put the entire murder plot into action. This is what would come out at trial. Donna, according to the prosecution, convinced her son Charlie, one of her two sons, to hire someone to kill Dan. Charlie hired his girlfriend and the son of her children to kill Dan Markel for a whopping $100,000. Charlie's girlfriend was a woman named Katie McBanoa, and the father of her children was a man named Sigfredo Garcia. He went by Tuto. Tuto then hired his childhood friend, Luis Rivera, to drive from Miami to Tallahassee to shoot and kill Dan. The prosecutor pointed out that Donna never, ever, 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 ever had any contact with anyone besides her son, Charlie. But the prosecution said that's where this conspiracy comes into play. This was a puzzle, and that they would be putting together this puzzle for the jury throughout the trial. Here, the shooter and the getaway driver took 2 trips to Tallahassee, once in June, to commit the murder, but while they were following Dan Markel, they lost him and aborted the plan. The following month, in July of 2014, the duo returned, and that's when they got the job done. After shooting Dan, they drove back to Miami. But it was the rental vehicle that was the nail in their coffin. You see, it took a while to track down the rental car. But eventually, using phone towers, highway tags, meaning like the Easy Pay, and car rental contract, the investigators tracked down the shooter and the getaway driver. But before taking them in, due to the fact that time had elapsed since the murder and since they were able to identify the 2 perpetrators, well, the detectives decided to do something called tickle the wire. They set up a sting where an undercover agent walked up to Donna Adelson as she was on her way to pick up her grandkids And this undercover agent gave Donna a newspaper article. So it was kind of like a rolled up newspaper article. And it was an article about Dan's murder. In that, kind of like crumbled in there was a piece of paper with a phone number. The undercover agent told Donna that he wanted his friend to be taken care of just as Tuto and Katie had been taken care of. The prosecutor then said, had Donna not had anything to do with Dan's murder, if someone gave her a newspaper and was trying to basically extort money from her, the next call she would have made was to the police. However, that's not what Donna did. Instead, Donna picked up the phone and called her son Charlie and told him they needed to talk. And then there was mention about a TV. I'll get to the TV here in a second. Now, that conversation between Mama Donna, which is what the media is calling her, and Charlie Adelson led to Charlie scheduling a meetup with his now ex-girlfriend, Katie McBanua. That meeting between Charlie and Katie was recorded, although the couple, they didn't know that they were being recorded, but they did meet at a restaurant and they had been followed, and there was a wire that was recording the conversation. Charlie, during this conversation with his ex-girlfriend Katie, indicated that they should pay $5,000 to the person who was asking for money, but that it would be a charity, a form of charity. They weren't admitting to anything. They just wanted to move on with their lives. After this conversation between Charlie and Katie McBanua, the investigators leaned in and they arrested the shooter and the getaway driver. Months later, Katie McBanua herself was arrested, and then in 2023, Charlie Adelson was arrested for murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. The getaway driver eventually took a deal. In exchange for his testimony, he would get 19 years in prison. The shooter and Katie McBanua were tried together. Remember, they were a couple, or, they were an on and off again couple, and they had kids together. And during that trial between Katie McBanua and the shooter, Sigfredo Garcia, they were both tried together, and the shooter was convicted, but Katie she wasn't acquitted. There was a mistrial. But ultimately, Katie was convicted at a subsequent trial. Katie then turned on Charlie, and he was tried and convicted for all the same crimes against Dan Markel. Immediately after Charlie's conviction, the prosecutor told the jury that Donna began to research countries that did not have extradition with the United States. She then immediately purchased a one-way ticket to Vietnam. She also got an emergency visa, and she was ultimately stopped and arrested at the Miami airport as she prepared to flee the country with her husband. During the opening statements, the prosecutor also told the jury that the family's secret word for the murder for hire revolved around the purchase of a TV for Wendy. That's right. They never actually talked about murder in their communications with each other. They just referred to a television and how much that television would cost and how it would be cheaper to buy a television than to actually kill the ex-husband. Ha ha ha. Well, the prosecutor told the jury, guess what? At the exact time that Dan Markel was shot and killed in his driveway, Wendy's alibi, remember she's the ex-wife, was conveniently that she was getting her new TV repaired. A repair that was, scheduled by her parents. The opening was very detailed, and they really did not leave any stone unturned. For the defense opening, I was personally shocked. The defense attorney, Jackie Fulford, she spent a great deal of time talking about the victim and how kind he was and how he loved his kids and that he would do anything to be near them and raise them. Then, not really even making a connection, she jumped into Donna Adelson and how kind she was and how she would never do anything like this. She basically alluded that Donna was an old granny and would never or could never be so manipulative. By the way, Donna Adelson is now 75 years old, just FYI. So the murder happened a little bit over a decade ago. So she was, way younger back then. The defense attorney argued that the killers are behind bars and that Donna had nothing to do with it. The defense emphasized that while the state has painted a sensational story, Donna as an embattled matriarch hell-bent on orchestrating a murder, it has produced zero evidence directly tying her to any criminal act in this case. She said, quote, "You heard an awful lot about what other people did in this case, but not a single piece of evidence was discussed that shows that Donna Adelson planned this, hired anybody to do this, or intended that this happen," end quote. The defense then invited the jurors to see Donna for who she really was, a 64-year-old grandma at the time, law-abiding, kind, and just basic. She painted a picture of a woman who cares more about other people than she does about herself. And by the way, she has zero history of a criminal background. The defense stressed that while others, including Donna's son Charles and known intermediaries, may have played roles in this tragedy, that doesn't make Donna culpable. She asked the jurors to actually look at who actually did what, not just who might have had a motive. The defense kind of summed it up this way, quote, "This is outrageous, but what's more outrageous is that without evidence, only with motive and theory, they put her at the top of this pyramid," end quote. All right, alternates, let's get into the witnesses because they were jam-packed today. The first witness on the stand was James Jim Geiger, and Jim was Dan Markel's next-door neighbor. He took the stand, he was elderly, and he described that on the morning of the shooting, he and his wife were sitting by the front window. They had like a bay window, and they were doing something, whether they were having coffee or tea, I can't quite remember. But all of a sudden, they heard a bang. Jim looked outside and he saw a silver/white car jet out of Dan's driveway, just like back up and leave. Jim was confused, so he walked over to Dan's house and he saw Dan's garage in the garage with the garage door open, and the car was on. So Jim just walked over. He's like, "Oh, everything seems to be fine." So he just returned home. He kept looking out the window to see if Dan would leave, right, because the car was on. But after about 5 to 10 minutes of not seeing anything happen over at Dan's house, Jim went back outside and he went to Dan's garage. That's when he realized that nothing had changed from when he had walked away prior. The garage door was open, the car was inside, and the car was on. That's when he walked towards the driver's side door and he noticed that the window of the driver's side door was shattered, and on the floor there was glass. Danny was sitting in the driver's side of his car with the car still on. Jim called out, "Dan, Danny, Danny, Danny," but Danny didn't respond, although Jim did say that Danny was moving. He was kind of like rocking his head back and forth. Jim went to retrieve his phone from his pocket, but realized he didn't have it in there. That's when he went back home and called 911. That was the extent of his testimony, and the defense didn't even cross-examine him. And, this lack of cross-examination would be a theme for day one. Next up was Officer David Sims. He was the first Tallahassee officer on the scene. He described exactly what he saw. He described that Dan was unresponsive, and he also described that Dan's glasses, because Dan used to wear glasses, his glasses were broken and off of his face. Half of the glasses were on his lap, and the other half of the glasses were on the floorboard. Dan was holding his cell phone in one hand and a business card in the other. Again, no cross-examination of this witness. The next witness was Joanne Maltese, a forensic specialist for Tallahassee. She was on the scene, and she was the one who took pictures of what she saw. She also described finding Dan's wallet still containing cash, indicating that this was not a robbery gone wrong. She also took pictures of Wendy's minivan when it was found, and inside there was a liquor bottle and a receipt. Joanne also took pictures of Dan Markel at the hospital. She described his injuries, at least visually. She noted something that she called stippling, which was evidence of a close-range gunshot. Once she was done with her statement, there was no cross-examination. Next up was Dr. Anthony Clark, the medical examiner. During his testimony is when Donna became visually upset. Remember in the beginning, I told you that she became really upset. This was when, in the beginning, she started to get really upset. Oh, and one more thing I do want to point out. Donna, throughout the trial, is wearing headphones, presumably to be able to hear the witnesses more clearly. Dr. Clark was the one who performed Dan's autopsy. He noted 2 gunshot wounds to Dan's head. He also removed the 2 bullets, and entered them into evidence. He also determined the cause of death as gunshot wounds to the face and head, and the manner of death as homicide. Now, I will point out that the doctor stated that one of the gunshots went practically right between Dan's eyes, which would explain the glasses being broken in half. He also explained that one shot went through the window, shattering the window, and Dan was hit with both the bullet and the shattered glass. Then there was a second bullet that shot directly into Dan's head. After this, there was a stipulation of fact. The two projectiles, meaning the two bullets that were recovered at the scene, were shot from the same revolver. The next witness was investigator Craig Isom, and he took up the majority of the testimony this day. He was the investigator, I believe he was the lead investigator, and he also was the investigator who interviewed Wendy Adelson. He found her having lunch with two other individuals, and he was the one who approached her and was like, hey, he brought her to the side. He was like, I have to talk to you about your ex-husband. Don't worry, your kids are fine, but we need to ask you some questions. This investigator, after interviewing Wendy, quickly learned that her and Dan had gone through a very contentious divorce. I mean, Wendy did not try to hide that at all. And he also learned that they were still litigating a few things at the time of the murder. Wendy Adelson was also the one who told the investigators that her family could have a motive to have wanted Dan dead. Through this witness, the prosecution attempted to introduce the entire divorce filing, but there was much back and forth and objections with the defense, so the introduction of the filing, at least the entire divorce filings, it seems to me like they will be introduced piecemeal or that they will be introduced at a later date when Wendy Adelson testifies. Investigator Isom then walked the jury through surveillance video that he obtained showing how the hitman, basically entered Tallahassee and left Tallahassee. And they did so in a light green Toyota Prius. They showed surveillance that showed the Prius following the victim during the morning hours prior to the shooting. The car followed Dan to the gym, and then after the gym followed Dan towards his house. Then he discussed obtaining bus camera footage showing the same car leaving Dan's neighborhood. Through dogged investigation, this investigator was able to figure out that Toyota Prius was rented in Miami, and that's how they obtained the name of the shooter and the getaway driver. He also discussed investigating the Adelson family practice and their payment records, or like kind of how they paid their employees. And by the way, it should be noted that Katie McBanowa was eventually put on the payroll for the Adelson practice, which is a dental practice in Miami. However, this investigator said he never found anyone who stated that she actually worked there, although she was placed on their payroll. And the person who signed every single one of Katie McBanowa's checks was Donna Adelson. Cross-examination for this witness went to show that Donna was not in any of the investigation besides the fact that she signed those records, right? She wasn't part of the rental agreement with the vehicle. Her phone was never located in any of the phone records, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the extent of that kind of cross-examination. But then the final witness of the day was the getaway driver. His name was Luis Rivera, and I'm going to say he's kind of like a star witness here. Luis Rivera rolled up to the courtroom in his prison navy blue jumpsuit, and he was all chained up. His legs were chained up, his hands were chained up, and occasionally, as he testified, when he tried to move his hands, you can actually kind of hear the chains jiggle, which is really impactful if you think about it. Luis Rivera has tattoos all up his chest and up his neck. Under direct examination, Rivera began his account with stark clarity. He and his childhood friend, Sigfredo Tuto Garcia, were hired to kill Dan Markel. Months after the plot was hatched, they drove up from South Florida to Tallahassee to lay in wait. What did he know about Dan Markel when he went up there? He basically said, I knew absolutely nothing about the guy. All he knew was that Katie, who was Sigfredo's baby mama, was hired to kill a man because the ex-wife of this man wanted the kids. Like, that's literally all he knew, and he was game. He was like, let's do it. Prior to killing Dan, all that Lewis had was a picture of Dan and an address to his house. That was it. He also said that he had originally thought it would have been easier to just rob the people who had hired them to commit the murder because, I mean, if they have like a safe full of money, why don't we just go get the money instead of like committing a murder? But after he ran this idea by Tuto said, no, we got to get it done. Rivera then described the failed hit attempt in June, but then said they were told to return and get the job done. So that's what they did. In July of 2014, he rented that green Toyota Prius from Miami, and they drove up to Tallahassee. Rivera described that he rented the car and that prior to the murder, Garcia had actually accidentally discharged one of the guns in the vehicle, hitting the gas line. So picture this. You have these two guys who have been hired to commit this murder for hire. They're in Tallahassee in this rental car, and then the actual shooter, Sigfredo, accidentally discharges the gun in the rental vehicle and hits the gas line. He then describes that the car just kind of like slowly but surely just stopped working. They then had to contact an acquaintance in Tallahassee to help fix the vehicle. They got it fixed, and they still were able to get the job done. That's when they were like, all right, we have to kill this Dan Markel guy. Rivera described the moment, and it was kind of shocking to hear this. He says, quote, I pulled up right behind him, and Garcia jumped out and shot him, end quote. There was no elaborate detail. It was just a cold, precise recounting of how the events unfolded right there in Dan's driveway. He was a complete stranger. They didn't have any ill will towards him. They just were going to get paid $100,000. When questioned about payment, Rivera revealed a grim, almost surreal memory. He said the total payout was going to be $100,000. At least that's what he thought. While he and Katie McBonowa never usually spoke on the phone, on the morning after the murder, Katie couldn't get a hold of Tuto. So she called Luis Rivera to assist in getting a hold of Tuto because she had this cash that she wanted to give to the respective players. Rivera described the money was different than, he usually saw because it was different because it was stapled. All the hundreds were stapled together, creating these stacks of $1,000, and he had never really seen money stapled like that before. And one more thing, the money was wet. Apparently, the money had been washed to remove evidence. When asked what he did with the money, he said he purchased a motorcycle. When he asked what the shooter did with the money, he said that Sigfredo purchased a motorcycle and a car, and that was about a month after the murder. During cross-examination, the defense attorney, Jackie Fulford, she pivoted quickly, steering Lewis's testimony toward Donna Adelson's daughter, Wendy. She pointed out, point blank, the woman who wanted him killed was Wendy Adelson, correct? With simple affirmation, Rivera said, absolutely, making for a very dramatic moment in the courtroom. Fulford then moved to introduce an image that she had put together. Like, it was almost like a pyramid of people. It was like pictures of people kind of like in a pyramid. And here is how that evidence was presented to the jury.
The woman who wanted him to be killed, past you and Sigfredo and Katie, the woman who wanted him to be killed was Wendy Adelson, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
It was she wanting her children, correct?
Absolutely.
May I approach your Honor? Mr. Garcia, I'm going to show you what has
Mr.
been...
Rivera.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I apologize. Mr. Rivera, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 50. Could you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize that?
Yeah.
And what is that?
It's like a profile of everybody's face.
Okay. And did you make some marks on this for me and then sign it on March the 11th of 2025?
Yes, I did.
You just hold on to that for a second. Mr. Vera, when we met with you that day taking your deposition and I presented that to you, you gave us information about what had happened, pretty similar to what you talked about here today, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when we were done talking about those things and some information about Sigfredo and Katie, I presented you with what's in front of you as Defendant's Exhibit 50, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I asked if you would put the number 1 and circle it next to the person you know as Katie, who you said was in charge of this whole deal, correct?
Yep.
And did you do that?
Yep.
All right. And then I said, would you put a number 2 next to the person you say did this killing?
Yes.
And you did that, correct?
Yes, I did.
And that was Sigfredo Garcia.
Yes, ma'am.
The first one was Katie McBanois, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then I said, would you put a number 3 next to yourself on the paper? And did you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're the one who got the gun that was used to kill Danny Markell, and you drove the car that day. You didn't shoot him, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So there you have it, alternates. That wrapped up day 1. That was a full day with loads of witnesses and lots of evidence. The judge had indicated that he wants this trial, or the judge has indicated that he wants this trial wrapped up by September 5th. The judge had indicated that he wants this trial wrapped up by September 5th. So I assume that each day will be packed to the brim with witnesses. Be sure to click that follow button wherever you're listening or watching so that you don't miss our daily recaps. Thank you so much, alternates. Be sure to show us some love by rating the show and leaving us a comment wherever you're watching or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, think like a juror, decide like one too.